Okay, following the break, we are honored to present today's keynote speech by Professor Andreas Scheleicher, one of the most anticipated talks of the day. And Professor Christoph, co-chair of ICAS, will serve as the moderator. Then I will hand over the microphone to Professor Christoph.
Thank you so much, Myung Kong, for this wonderful occasion. I'm very glad and very excited, actually, honestly, to welcome on board Professor Andreas Schleicher, the director from OECD Education. Let me share a few words of introduction, not if he would need any introduction, so everybody knows him, of course. So I think none of us had that much direct or indirect influence on educational development than he has. So and his team actually. So I don't know if the day when PISA started, he expected this kind of enormous influence that this assessment makes. And I would be also happy to mention that beyond the PISA influence, Andreas Schleicher is very active in all kind of forums to act also as a visionary in educational policy and beyond policy also on the everyday practice. So Andreas Schleicher is the director for education and skills at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. And he's known as the person who initiated the program for international student assessment, as we all know, PISA. And he has worked over 20 years with ministers, educational leaders all around the world. And he really present actually in a planetary perspective, so not only related to this or that educational cohort, but he tried to influence basically everywhere for good. And my personal story, if I may share that, was started during the pandemic time, during lockdown, when we organized a conference for creative education on UNESCO Day for Creativity. And we had the great honor to welcome Andreas Schleicher as a speaker. However, lockdown came just right then. So when we started to prepare this conference, we were not aware, of course, that what kind of is coming, that it was like the pre-COVID time when we started to organize the conference. But then it was the COVID time when the conference took place. Actually, it was our first large COVID season. And Andreas Schleicher joined the conference online. We turned from one day to another online, the whole organization. And when we expected like some hundreds people on site, we faced with 12,000 actually viewers of the materials what we put out during COVID time. Thanks also for the enormous support received from Andreas Schleicher. And he was very brave, he was very hopeful to talk about the power of creativity in education and the importance of creativity in education. And he explained to us that how the assessment should consider also creativity related components and developments and tendencies in education. So what could be more important and more actual, more current today when we have a lot of concerns also in connection with the technological developments, artificial intelligence versus our human creativity, to invite him again and talk to have a discussion about such another important issue, which is the gender related questions in STEM and STEAM careers. So without saying more, I would like to give the floor to Dr. Andreas Scheleicher. We are very excited to hear you today. Thanks a lot for accepting our invitation. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the very kind introduction, and I'm glad to join you here from Brazil, where we have the G20 Education Ministerial in these days. And I think the topic that you are discussing is one that is very close to the discussions of education ministers here. We face a rapidly evolving world, and our education systems need to get ready for this. And even something as simple as STEM, something that seems so intuitive, is changing its nature. Let me just share my screen to help you sort of follow that in an easier way. And I want to start with actually what you just highlighted, the pandemic that has fundamentally disrupted not just our lives, but also our ways of thinking about education. And the future will always surprise us. Climate change is going to disrupt our lives even more than the pandemic, much, much more. No? And artificial intelligence, we just heard that in the previous conferences, is fundamentally, challenging how we think about education. We know how to educate second-class robots, people who are very good at repeating what we told them. But what is making us human in a world in which the kind of things that are easy to teach, easy to test, have become easy to digitize, to automate. And you can add so many more disruptors into this picture. None of us here know what the future will bring. We don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow. But the better we become at anticipating different versions of the future and think about what that means for education, what we can do today, the more versatile we become in our thinking about the future, the better we will be prepared for the future that eventually arrives. And what is very clear is that we need to reconcile, on the one hand, to make our world more sustainable, help the next generation, be better, to reconcile the future with the present. Our generations have not been very good at that. We have often sacrificed the future for our present today. We did that in the finance world. We indebted our countries. We did that certainly on the environment, and the question is, can we do better? Can we, find a better balance between the future and the present, but at the same time also enable people to live in a world that is out of balance? A world that is changing quickly, in a world where every day you wake up in a new context. And that is an equally great challenge, that emotional, that social, that cognitive resilience. So I'll be trying to look at this when I look at STEM. And the first, point I really want to make is that educating people with STEM skills or STEAM skills, you can add the A. I mean, I'm actually, in two minds about it. I think sometimes it is important for us to focus on the science aspects of it. And it is one of the best investments we can make in the future of this planet. And I'll try to explain why and how. When we ask 15-year-olds in the PISA contexts to what extent they are aware of environmental issues, you could see most 15-year-olds are pretty confident to tell you about the consequences of clearing forests, greenhouse gases, and CO2 emissions, nuclear waste, and so on. It's not that there's a shortage of awareness. Young people, for them, the climate agenda is important, it's urgent. When you ask them another question, how confident are you that those questions can be addressed? The bars get a lot shorter. Air pollution, clearing forests, water shortage, nuclear page. You have less than 1 in 5 young people who are confident that humanity will address those issues. And that confidence is quite important. If we lose that confidence, we will lose that agency to address those kinds of challenges. And now you can ask yourself, what drives that confidence? And, whether students are interested in science was not a really important driver. No. Even where students expected a career in science, we could not see them, more or less confident that those issues can be overcome. I mean, think about that. Young people who say, I want to become a scientist, but who are not confident that science and humanity can address the challenges of humanity. Something in our STEM education seems to be going wrong. Disadvantage plays into this. I think that's very kind of clear. Gender. Girls were less confident than boys. But the biggest driver is the science score, the achievement of young people in science. Isn't that interesting? The more young people knew about science, the science of the environment, the less, more realistic they were in appreciating the challenges for humanity. Now you can say, oh, well, just let's avoid teaching STEM and then everybody will be confident that, the environment will be addressed. But, of course, this is a very naive optimism. Students who did not know the science of the environment, the science underpinning those mechanisms, had a very naive optimism. They were saying, oh, tomorrow there's going to become a magic politician who's going to, solve all of those problems. I don't need to change my behavior. Whereas students who had a strong foundation in science, they knew this will not change unless I take action. So you can really see how it is really the knowledge and skills that drives our behavior, our awareness. And you can see that also when you just look at the awareness factors. Students doing better in science were a lot more aware of those kinds of environmental issues. And here's now also where the interest comes in. Students who were interested in science were not necessarily less or more optimistic, but they were certainly much more aware of those kinds of issues. So here you see the, action for climate is not just about activism. It's not just about doing things. It's very much about knowing and being able to do the knowledge and skills that underpin science. Can you think like a scientist now? That is very, very important. Let me just, highlight a few about this. I talked about the importance of knowledge in science, but it's not everything. When you actually look at the self-efficacy and environmental understanding, the share of students, for example, who say that they can explain how carbon dioxide emissions affect global climate change, now you can see Singapore and Korea are at the top of the scale. Now, young people have learned those kinds of things in school and they are very confident, they know this and they can explain that. So that's a good thing. You can see actually that knowledge is very deeply rooted in countries like Singapore and Korea. But when you look at, what do students actually do with this? Here you see the share of students who said that they would choose, something in a supermarket for ethical or environmental reasons, even if it's a little bit more expensive. You can see in Korea that share was actually comparatively low, and in Singapore also. Singapore is also not particularly good at that. And this is what counts eventually. Will your knowledge, will your skills translate into your behavior? That's what, a future STEM education really needs to about. I mean, you can see it's not automatically the case. Some students that have learned a lot, are not necessarily changing their behavior to, facilitate that. So we need to address that knowing-doing gap if we want, and that is, when I talk later about the future of a STEM education, that's very much what I will talk about. How do we build agency? How does STEM not become, a dry school subject, formulas and equations on a whiteboard, but something where students understand the ideas of STEM, the nature of STEM. Now, once again, whether you can think like a scientist is so much more important these days than whether you know certain formulas and equations. It's not about, do you know the results of a scientific experiment? It's are you able to design a scientific experiment? And I say that from own experience. And I'm a scientist by background, and often it breaks my heart when I see how we teach science like religion. We make young people believe in some scientific theory, then we give them lots of exercises to practice this, and at the end we test whether they remember our answers. You know, science has nothing to do with remembering answers. Science is about asking the question, not reproducing the wisdom of our times, but putting it into question, thinking around the next corner, developing new hypotheses, assessing those hypotheses. Very, very important. It's also an important societal imperative. Conspiracy theories are everywhere nowadays. People believe in lots of things that have no foundation in the real world. When I was a child, and I would have, told you, the earth is flat. You would have told me immediately, you're crazy. Just look out of the window. You can see the earth is round. But today, if I say the earth is flat, I can say millions of other people on the internet agree, it's my truth. It's something I believe in. And those things become accepted as fact. And that highlights that a shared reality is missing in our world. And that's really what STEM is about, to create that shared reality around us, a reality that is grounded in a deep understanding. Today's pandemic, are not just, a crisis of STEM knowledge, but also a crisis of public decision-making in this. Let me give you another angle on this. Students expecting a career in STEM. Here you can see, the share of 15-year-olds who want to, devote some of their future to STEM. And look at Korea or Japan or Finland or, China or Germany. Those are all countries that actually do quite well on STEM. If you test young people in PISA, those kids in those countries get actually quite good, scores on the science test. But you can also see they don't want to become scientists. No. And what use is it to know a lot in STEM if that is not opening life opportunities for you, career opportunities for you? That's another dilemma that we have. If we teach STEM, how do we not only convey the STEM knowledge, but produce that engagement, that interest, that, where students see that STEM is something for me, for my future, where I see opportunities in my life. Look at the Americans. Isn't that interesting? They don't do very well on STEM. When you test American 15-year-olds, they don't have that knowledge. Certainly far away from Korea or Japan or Finland or China or Germany. American students are not doing particularly well on STEM in school. But many of them want to become a scientist. They have that optimism, that interest, that curiosity, that agency. That's something that we should take to heart. How do we build those two dimensions together, that young people leave school not just with a lot of knowledge, but with that agency, that future orientation, that optimism? And, if you ask yourself, what is linking the two, the STEM knowledge and the STEM agency? It's not so difficult. When students did not enjoy science, there's very little relationship between their science score here on the horizontal axis and the share of young people who want to have a career in science. Students who do not enjoy science may do well on a test, but they will not do this in their life, at least not when they're 15. When students did enjoy science, you can see suddenly the relationship becomes really strong. Look at this, right? The kids in school enjoy what they do in STEM. The knowledge translates into aspirations. So, the social and emotional side of STEM is as important as the cognitive side, like creating that interest, nurturing that agency, making STEM something that is experiential. No? Having students do the experiment rather than just learn about it, no? But be taught about the results. What you remember from your science classes is not the experiment that your teacher explained. It's the experiment that you actually did and that you enjoyed doing, where you learned something, where you had that moment of seeing the results. That's a really important lesson. And we need to not just look at the amount of knowledge we convey, but the engagement it produces. Now, the trick of science teaching tomorrow is really about, making sure that young people are interested, enjoying it, that they do things, experiences, teaching fewer things in greater depth in STEM, teaching about the nature, the idea of the scientific disciplines rather than just the phenomena they produce. That's really the answer to translating, that knowledge into actual behavior. When you think about, what could a future STEM education look like, it starts with conceptual understanding, the belief in a common reality, in common ideas, in common concepts. The drive to reason with, in a causal way. To try to build causal connection. That's, the foundation of STEM. Not to teach the surface, not to teach, all, the content knowledge only, but really give young people a deep understanding of the concept. In mathematics, we spend a lot of time teaching people how to calculate an exponential function. That's very nice, but it's not what you really need to learn. What you need to learn is the idea, the concept of an exponential function. It's not a human concept. We as humans are born into a linear world. Time is linear, space is linear. That's the world we are comfortable in. That's the world that is human. Exponentials are not human. We don't have a sense for that. No? But many phenomena in the world are exponential in nature. If you want to, understand climate change, you've got to have an understanding of the concepts underpinning. If you want to understand the evolution of a pandemic, you better know something about exponentials. No? That something that starts very slow can suddenly get an incredible pace. Not a kind of intuitive concept, but one in which the world of mathematics can open a new understanding for us. So that understanding of concepts is so important. Probabilistic thinking, most of the phenomena in today's world are not about certainties, they're about probabilities. We need to be able to find signal in noise, understand, what are the likelihood of something happening. Assign, credence levels to what we observe. Is likely to happen, not likely. What does this label mean? Being open to learn, to unlearn, to relearn when the context changes. That, probabilities can turn out in different results. Human cognition, our, knowledge, our skills, our attitudes, our values are incredibly important to this. And then, last but not least, I pointed to this already, that can-do attitude in STEM, that scientific optimism, that science can provide an answer if we take it serious. Even something as, profound as climate change. Science can help us to mitigate it, to adapt to it, and actually to combat it. The fact that we have a net zero target for the climate as humanity is an incredible achievement. Humanity, understood those implications and is starting, even if it's not sufficient, to act on it. That growth mindset that, if we invest effort, we will achieve results. If we lose that, we've lost everything. Young people will just become pessimistic, go for the shortest, become cynical about the phenomena. Those are the foundations of a future STEM education. If we deliver on that. So what will the future bring? Educational attainment is, growing very rapidly. If you look at 2020, And it's particularly rapidly growing among women. I think that's a very, very strong sign that we can see. When you look, for example, compare the young generation, that's the blue bar, with the old generation, that's the yellow dot. You can see Korea is an incredibly impressive example. Look, 2 generations ago, very, very few Korean women studied in university. And today, Korea is one of the top countries. Things can change. And, getting a good education is the foundation for STEM as well. So in a sense, I think women have made incredible progress in education over the last generations. When you look at international mobile students, you can also say often they go to study STEM. They may not find that in their home country. They go somewhere else where there is a good STEM education. When you look, for example, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, is really, I think, in some countries, over half of the students now. My country, Germany, you can see it's over 50%. Finland and Sweden, over 40%. Canada as well. So you can see really that is a very popular destination for young people. And that's a good thing. You can actually go somewhere to study to broaden your perspective. In Korea, it's still very limited, and that's perhaps, I can't really give you a reason for this, because Korean students are doing well in STEM, but it seems that that is not, why people would go to Korea for the purpose of studies now. Human tasks are shifting. That's also very, very important. It is not, that artificial intelligence is replacing humans, but specific tasks are ones that AI is doing better. The future is not, I don't believe AI will ever replace humans, certainly not in the STEM fields. But humans who are good at using AI may well replace humans who struggle with the digital transition. So I think that's really that combination of human and AI skills in the STEM fields, in all tasks, is going to be increasingly important. We need to embed that in our ways in learning and teaching STEM. I already mentioned routine tasks are disappearing from our world. Now that's where AI and technology take over. Now, technology-intensive tasks are on the rise, and when you put the two things together, you can get a glimpse of the future of work. We do not know exactly how this plays out. Now, some people believe, technology will destroy more jobs than it creates. Other people say it creates more jobs than it destroys. We do not know the answer to that, but the direction of travel is very, very clear. Now, some people compare that with a race between education and technology. Before the first industrial revolution, neither technology nor education made a big difference for our lives. But then, the industrial revolution, for the first time, put technology ahead of the skills of people. And it created huge social pain. We didn't have social welfare systems, nothing. People were left on the street without work. They could no longer participate. But then, we invented school. We try to make people compliant with the ideas and functioning of the industrial society, and it created generations of prosperity. But if we're honest, we haven't really changed our paradigm in education. And now we see the digital revolution fundamentally changing the equation, putting technology again ahead of the skills of people and starting to create that same social pain. Our task is to turn that around, to see that humans are once again ahead of the technologies of our times. And this is where STEM comes in, where STEM is so important. If you don't understand the nature of an algorithm, you're going to be soon the slave of that algorithm. That is why it is so important to advance our thinking skills, our developing skills. When you want to educate for the future, the first thing I think is very clear. What education should achieve is, help you find out why you are here on this planet. Now, what is important to you? Right? What is it that you want to do in this world? Some people may know by themselves, but education clearly is, a tool to help us understand. Education can help us understand, what we can become good at, helping us to discover our, hidden talents. And that means, good teachers today should not just be good instructors. They need to be good coaches, good mentors, good facilitators, good evaluators, creative designers of innovative learning environments. And that doesn't make you happy. You know, what makes us happy is always the difference we make to the lives of others, to our humanity. Helping young people understand, you know, what the world needs from them, and then ultimately translate better skills into better jobs and better lives. So that's what we really need to expect from a future education, from a future STEM education. Let me illustrate that with a few pointers. You know, if I look at Korea, the PISA score in science, PISA score in mathematics, the PISA score in reading, yeah, there has been, you know, a little drop at the last few years, but overall, you know, we give Korea still 10 out of 10 points on academic knowledge. Much better than the OECD average that you can see here as the little blue dot. Korean education is very, very strong on STEM knowledge. And that's, I think, a tribute to the success of the education system. But, you know, if you look beyond that, there are areas where Korean education can improve. You can see the orange bar. Now, Korean students are not so happy. They don't feel that sense of belonging, that sense of identity, that sense of psychological well-being that you would want to see among your students. You can see the emotional resilience. The light green bar is not so long. Korean students, you know, have difficulties coping with change, with unforeseen circumstances. And again, I highlighted at the beginning, that is very, very important. And certainly the school-leisure balance is not very good. And for Korean students at age 15, there's not much of a world beyond school. There's not much of a world where they take ownership, where they take, you know, responsibility. Most of their life is pretty much structured by the outside world. So you can see, yes, Korea is very, very strong academically, but when you think about a future STEM education, that sense of resilience, that sense of, you know, ownership can still be developed. And we need to look at that. Let me show you Albania in Europe. It's almost the antithesis of Korea. You can see the yellow bar is very short. You can see Albanian students are not doing well on STEM knowledge. Mathematics, reading is difficult for them. The education system has not been very successful in developing academic skills. But look at the orange bar. Albanian students seem to be very happy. Look at the light green bar. They seem to be very resilient. Now you can say, oh, well, maybe we have to make a choice. You know, either students become great in STEM knowledge and then they will be unhappy like the Koreans, or they become very happy and then, you know, we compromise academic ability. That's often the kind of discussion that we see. But actually, when you look at a country like Denmark, you can see in the case of Denmark, students are academically strong. They are happy students. They show a good level of agency. That can-do attitude that is so important in STEM. That emotional resilience is present. They have a strong, you know, set of social relationships, a good school-leisure balance. Now, Danish students know how to organize their lives beyond school. So what I'm telling you here is that we can reconcile those different objectives. Now, and once again, a STEM education can be one of the best investments that we can make into the future of the planet now. Giving young people not just the knowledge and skills, but giving them the kind of, you know, ideas, now, particularly for women. You can see that the share of girls among new graduates in tertiary education has not very much changed over the last 20 years. In some areas, you know, computing, information technology, we've even seen a decline. This is not about knowledge. Girls do as well as boys in STEM knowledge. But it's about the attitudes, the aspirations that underpin it, that sense of optimism, that sense of agency. And you can see tertiary educated men and women graduate from different fields of study. That is not changing. Not because we haven't become very good at teaching that knowledge, but we lack, you know, those underpinning attitudes and values. And you can see very clearly, you know, there are areas, information and communication technology, where women are even less represented today than they were represented 20 years ago. These are things that we need to work on. If we want to, you know, build a better world through education, we need to think about a new STEM education, a STEM education that really provides very strong foundations for people. A STEM education that gives people not just, the knowledge and skills, but that sense of identity that, sees STEM as something that opens life opportunities, that makes us see the future, but also gives us the optimism that humans can do something about this. So education has been successful in some ways, but still has a long way to go in many other respects. And I will end here so that we have enough time for our discussion.
Thank you so much, Andreas Scheleicher, for the insightful talk. Your words inspired a lot of discussion, actually, already in the chat line. So I would like to invite to join the conversation for one of the most active participants. So I would like to invite Myung Hong, my colleague from the organizing team, and also Carla Pinto from Portugal. Maybe you can open the discussion and maybe inspire others to have more questions and comments in the chat as well. So Myung Hong, please share some of your thoughts, what you already put in the chat.
Thank you, Professor Andreas and Scheleicher. It was a really intriguing and very insightful presentation indeed. Actually, as an education policy researcher myself, I'm always interested in some PISA result. And the PISA result has been influential in education policies of all over the countries, and especially in the country's education policy direction. And so as a South Korean researcher, actually, South Korean students are doing quite well in PISA test. But my question is that students here are not happy among OECD students, according to the PISA result. And your speech, I was particularly very intrigued about the comment that we should teach students what you love and what you are good at and what the world needs. And something kind of things have been very missing in Korean curriculum so far. And we truly, genuinely need to consider now what we really should teach to the students. And we are not solely interested in the development of cognitive aspects of students, but also some kind of social skills and emotional aspect things. So I need to learn a lot about that. So thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think this is something that many education systems need to learn, that education is more than the transmission of knowledge. We need to reconcile the cognitive, the social, emotional development of young people. And this is also very important with a view to the future. The success of education today is not whether you get a degree, but whether you have that energy, that interest, that motivation to learn and unlearn and relearn throughout your life. So I think we need to, change the goalpost on that and ensure that teachers have time with students outside the classroom settings, that they become good coaches, good mentors, good, creative designers of innovative learning environments. And I think many teachers are ready for that. I think the question is, can our systems become more open to make that happen?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I also brought on stage Professor Seoung-Hey Paik, who actually been the main chair of our meeting. And I would like to ask Carla to please also share some of your many reactions, many insights in the chat. So.
Thank you, Christoph. Thank you, Professor Andreas. It was really, I was thrilled to listen to your lecture, to your talk here, to this beautiful discussion that you have. I can be quite chatty. I'm sorry for that, Christoph and Myung. So I wrote a lot of things on the chat. And I totally agree with everything that you said, including mathematics. We were discussing a little bit about mathematics exactly when I gave here the talk. But I have one question for you, is that in the scope of what you just said, so you said there are teachers who are available and willing to do that. But then you said, but are our systems ready for it? And I think a huge CV burden is really what is getting in front, or is an obstacle, is the real challenge for what we have now in front of us, right? And also, but I don't want, with this, I don't want to say that we should lower our expectations on our students, the level of what we teach them. But in some way, we need to be able to restructure our CV in order not to lower the scientific knowledge, but to address and to deliver it in such a way that they can really understand it and not memorizing it. I'm a math teacher, and the first thing I tell to my students, I don't memorize formulas. I understand them and then I apply them. Do not memorize formulas, please. So, Andreas, your highlights about this, okay? Thank you so much again. It was wow.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, lowering expectations actually achieves nothing. It will not lead to greater student engagement. It will not lead to greater student motivation. It will destroy the growth mindset. If you tell a young person, you know, actually you're not so great, you know, we will make it easier for you, you will actually lower their aspirations, destroy their dreams. And I think that's very dangerous. At the same time, you know, I think particularly technology today allows us to teach fewer things at greater depth. In a way, in the past, you did need to memorize formulas and equations and numbers and places because, you know, there was no other way to find them. Today, that's all on your fingertips, on your smartphone. But what you still need is the conceptual foundations. As you say, you need to understand the idea of the formula. You need to understand the, you know, the epistemic knowledge is becoming so much more important, but that opens opportunities for teachers. We can teach fewer things at greater depth. We can focus on conceptual understanding rather than on the accumulation of surface knowledge. And I think if we take that to heart, you know, we can even increase expectations for students because at the moment, you know, we have expectations for some students, but not for all. And I do think we can actually achieve much better results for many students with high expectations and enough time of teachers to engage with students. And, you know, I also believe that much of the knowledge transmission even will be done by artificial intelligence and will be done actually really very well by artificial intelligence. Why would you listen to your teacher to the results of a scientific experiment when you can do that in a virtual laboratory? So I think technology will open up a lot of things, but the human aspect of this, you know, to help you find out, you know, where you can become really good at, you know, what is possible and to become your coach. I think, but if teachers take the time for that, I think they can change the world.
Thank you so much. We are getting to the end of our time, and we know that Dr. Scheleicher agenda is very busy being in Brazil right now. However, teacher has been many times mentioned, and we have a teacher here from Finland who might have a very short reflection or a very brief question. Jukka Sinnemäki, are you here with us? Let's see if
He's
Jukka.
muted. Christoph, he's muted. He's here, but he's muted.
Can you give him the opportunity to unmute? I add him to the pin so you can identify Jukka. Okay, good. Please go ahead very shortly.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Andreas Scheleicher. Just one brief question. As you very well mentioned that the future is uncertain, unpredictable. We have a lot of increasing issues like mental issues and so on. What would be your advice? What would be the most fundamental thing to be cultivated in education today, if we just point one most important thing? Thank you.
I actually think, I would put STEM very close to the center of this. What education can do is can give you the confidence and create a shared reality for humanity, that we have a platform to talk to each other, a common set of beliefs and some certainties that give us the floor under our feet. Because where people do not find that floor, they're going to build walls around them, all sorts of walls, and beliefs, ideologies, and so on. So I actually would say, that I even don't see a contradiction to the social emotional side that you highlighted, to mental health. I actually think that common reality will strengthen our mental health. It will make us more confident, more optimistic about the future. So I actually think the topics that we are discussing here at this conference, I would put very, very central to education.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Scheleicher, also for your patience. Very sorry about the overtime. We wish you a further insightful time for you in Brazil. We hope to see you soon in various platforms. Thank you so much for joining us. Now,
thank you.
Thank you. And thanks a lot for Seoung-Hey Paik for making this wonderful event possible. Now we need to switch to Mihye Kim, who will share the conclusions of our meeting. Thanks a lot for everyone who was joining us today.
Okay, once again, we extend our deepest gratitude to Professor Andreas Scheleicher for taking the time out of his busy schedule to deliver today's keynote speech. With that, we have concluded all scheduled sessions for today's forum. So thank you to everyone who stayed until the end and contributed to the success of this event. Your presence truly made today's forum shine. And as a final note, I just want to make sure you may request and receive a certificate of attendance for this forum. So the link is, you can find it here on the very first page of our poster and program booklet. And it is also accessible through the ICAS website here. So you can see a pop-up window, and there is also a link connected through the 2024 conference section. So where you can register here. And all recorded presentations from today will be available for viewing on the ICAS website later on. But if you prefer, feel free to email me. Here is my email address, and I will be very happy to send you directly. Then thank you. Thank you all for your hard work and participation today. And I hope you enjoy a peaceful and happy weekend ahead. Even after the forum, please feel free to continue some small discussion online if you wish. And with that, I conclude. Looking forward to next year's conference. Then thank you all.
Thank you so much for everybody. See you soon.
Thank you so
And
much.
let's keep in touch. Please join ICAS email list. And thanks also for the ICAS board, especially Hugul Park and his colleagues for initiating this important meeting. Let it flourish in the upcoming years. Thank you so much for everybody for the contributions. See you soon.